please, I'm just asking for a piece of bread. I haven't eaten in 2 days." Those words tasted like rust in my mouth, but I forced them out anyway. Hunger has a way of stripping dignity faster than poverty ever could. I stood on the marble steps of my daughter Vanessa's mansion, my knees shaking, my hands numb from the cold, my coat hanging off me like it belonged to another woman because in that moment, it did. Let me make something clear right from the start. I wasn't really homeless. Not in the way people assume when they see someone sleeping under a bridge or asking for coins outside a gas station. I had a home, or at least I used to. I had money, power, and a name people returned my calls for. But in that moment on that doorstep, under that cold porch light, I chose to become someone else. I chose to become invisible. I became a test. Before you judge me, before you ask why a 62-year-old woman would reduce herself to this, let me tell you the truth plainly, without romance or excuses. I was betrayed by my own children. My name is Clara Jenkins. I am a widow. I built a food manufacturing company that once employed thousands. I paid for private schools, overseas degrees, weddings, down payments, and lifestyles my children now call normal. And one winter morning, after realizing my phone only rang when money was needed, I decided to disappear and see who would still see me as their mother when I had nothing left to give. I dressed myself in old clothes, dirtied my hands, let my hair go unwashed. I slept where no one knew my name. By the 3rd day, the hunger was no longer an act. My body didn't care about my intentions or my bank accounts. It only knew it was starving. That was when I went to Vanessa. The front door opened halfway. Vanessa stood there in an expensive coat, her face flawless, her eyes sharp. She didn't recognize me at first. When she did, her expression didn't soften. It hardened. "Mom?" she said slowly. "What is this?" I told her. Everything. That the company had collapsed, that I was bankrupt, that I had nowhere to go. Something ugly crossed her face. "So it's true," she said. "You lost everything." I nodded. She stepped back as if I'd confessed to a crime. "You can't be here," she said sharply. "Do you have any idea what this looks like?" "I'm cold," I whispered. "Vanessa, I'm hungry. I just need something to eat." She laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly in the way movies show villains laugh. It was worse than that. It was dismissive. "You're not my mother anymore," she said. "My mother was a strong woman, not this." Those words hit harder than the wind. "I raised you," I said. "Please, I'm still your mother." She shoved me. Not hard enough to injure me, but hard enough to make her point. I stumbled backward, lost my balance, and fell against the stone railing. My plastic bag tore open, spilling its useless contents onto her perfect porch. "Get up," she hissed, "and go. I won't have people seeing this." I reached for her sleeve, not even thinking. "Just some food, please." She yanked her arm away as if I'd infected her. "Get out," she said, slamming the door. I stayed on the ground for a moment, staring at the closed door, listening to the sound of locks turning. That was the moment something inside me cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. I walked away with bruised hands and something far worse. Clarity. Troy was next. My second child. My son. The one who used to promise he'd take care of me when I got old. The cardiologist. The healer. He opened the door and froze when he saw me. "What happened to you?" he asked, disgust barely masked as concern. I told him the same story. He sighed like I was an inconvenience interrupting his evening. He went into the kitchen, came back with a bottle of water and a wrapped sandwich, and tossed them onto the porch onto the dirty concrete at my feet. "There," he said. "That's all I can do." I bent down to pick them up. "Don't," he snapped. "Just take it and leave. I can't have this around my house." End quote. "I'm still your mother," I said quietly. He didn't answer. He just closed the door. I stood there staring at the food on the ground, bread and water, thrown to me like scraps, and that's when the truth finally settled in my bones. My children didn't just abandon me. They despised weakness. I walked until my legs barely held me. The sky darkened. My breath came out in painful bursts. By the time I reached Malcolm Street, I was no longer acting. I was exhausted, hungry, and hollow. Malcolm was my youngest, the teacher, the one I had worried about the least and valued the least. And his wife Alana, the woman I once believed wasn't good enough for my family. I rang the bell, already preparing myself for the final rejection. The door flew open. "Oh my God," Alana said. "Are you okay?" She didn't ask who I was. She didn't hesitate. She didn't look over her shoulder. She pulled me inside. The warmth hit me so hard I nearly collapsed. The smell of soup, the hum of a small heater, the sound of life continuing gently, it broke something open in my chest. Malcolm rushed in, panic on his face. "Mom, what happened?" I couldn't answer. I just cried. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to. They fed me. They wrapped me in a blanket. They didn't ask why. They didn't ask how. They didn't ask what I had to offer. That night, sitting at their small kitchen table, I understood something I had been blind to my entire life. Money had raised my children, but character had raised my son. And the woman I once looked down on was the only one who opened her door when I was nothing more than a hungry old woman asking for bread. This wasn't just a test anymore. It was a reckoning. If this story touched you, like the video and comment where you're watching from, you might be surprised who's watching near you. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not just the soup simmering on the stove or the fresh bread on the counter, but the scent of a lived-in home lemon-scented cleaner, fabric softener, something faintly floral that clung to the air like a memory. Alana led me to a chair in the kitchen and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders without asking questions. Her hands were firm but gentle, the kind of touch that told you, without words, that you were safe now. Malcolm filled a bowl with soup, thick with lentils and vegetables, and set it in front of me. He added a slice of bread and a glass of water, then sat across from me, his brow creased with concern. "Mom," he said softly, "what happened?" I stared at the food for a moment, overwhelmed. My stomach twisted with hunger, but something deeper knotted in my chest. Shame, grief, disbelief. I picked up the spoon with trembling fingers and took a bite. The warmth hit my throat like salvation. I swallowed hard, not just the food, but the reality of where I was and how I had gotten here. I made some mistakes, I whispered. The business. Things went wrong. Malcolm didn't interrupt. He waited, letting me speak on my own terms. There was a lawsuit, and some bad investments. I trusted the wrong people. I didn't want to burden anyone, so I disappeared. I thought I'd see who would look for me, who would care. I looked up from the bowl, my eyes meeting his. I went to Vanessa's, to Troy's. They both turned me away. Alana gasped quietly but said nothing. They didn't just reject me, I continued, my voice cracking. They treated me like trash. Vanessa said I wasn't her mother anymore. Troy, he threw food on the ground like I was a stray dog. Malcolm's jaw tightened. He reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. "I'm so sorry, Mom." And he meant it. I could feel it in the weight of his touch, the sorrow in his voice. Alana stood up and started fixing another plate. "You're staying here, as long as you need. No questions, no conditions." Tears welled up again. I tried to speak but couldn't. I simply nodded. They made up a bed for me on the pull-out couch in the living room. The cushions were worn, the blanket a little thin, but it felt like a luxury suite after 3 nights on the street. I lay there in the quiet, listening to the muffled hum of the heater and the soft clink of dishes being washed. For the first time in days, I let myself exhale fully. In the morning, I awoke to the smell of coffee and the sound of bacon crackling in a pan. Alana greeted me with a smile and a mug of coffee already sweetened with cream and sugar. "I didn't know how you take it," she said, "but this is how I like it." "It's perfect," I replied, holding the cup with both hands, letting it warm my fingers. Malcolm was already dressed for work, his lunch packed neatly in a paper bag with his name written in Alana's careful script. Before he left, he kissed her on the forehead and squeezed my shoulder. "I'll be back around 4, he said. "We'll talk more then. Rest up, Mom." I spent the morning helping Alana fold laundry and wash dishes, tasks I hadn't done in years. Not because I thought I was above them, but because, over time, I had forgotten the quiet satisfaction in the rhythm of small chores. Alana chatted as she worked, telling me about her students, her plans to go back to school for a master's degree, how she and Malcolm were trying to save for a better car. "We're not rich," she said, laughing, "but we've got each other, and that's more than most." I nodded, but inside, Her words stabbed deeper than she realized. Because I had never made space for that kind of life. Not for her. I had looked at her and seen limitations, not love. I had judged her because she didn't fit into the mold I'd created for my children's partners, polished, pedigreed, powerful. But here she was, feeding me, comforting me, without hesitation or resentment. Later that afternoon, while she was grading papers at the kitchen table, I went outside to sit on the back steps. The yard was small, fenced in, with a few stubborn flowers still blooming despite the cold. Purple pansies, yellow marigolds, simple things. But they looked proud just for surviving. Alana joined me after a while, handing me a warm throw. "These are his," she said, nodding toward the flowers. "Malcolm loves gardening, says it gives him hope." I smiled faintly. "Your home. It's small, but it feels big." She laughed. "That's what Malcolm always says. It's not about square footage, it's about heart." That night, over dinner, chicken thighs with roasted vegetables, I offered to leave the next day, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want to be a burden. Alana shook her head firmly. "You're not going anywhere, Clara. You need rest. You need time. And frankly, you deserve better than what you've been given." I looked down at my plate. "You don't even know the whole truth." "Maybe not," she said gently, "but I know you're hurting. And I know that when someone's down, you don't walk away. You kneel beside them." I couldn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how I had gotten it so wrong, how I'd raised two children who valued image over integrity and ignored the one who had quietly grown into a man of deep compassion. I thought about Walter, about how he had always said Malcolm was the soft one, the sensitive soul. I used to worry that softness would make him weak, but I was wrong. Softness is not weakness. It's strength in its truest form. As I drifted into sleep, I made a decision. This wasn't over. The test wasn't done. There would be a reckoning, and I would see it through to the end. I awoke to the gentle clatter of dishes in the kitchen and the warm smell of oatmeal mixed with cinnamon and apples. It took me a moment to remember where I was, not in a penthouse, not in a luxury suite, not in any of the spaces I had once owned, but in a small, modest home where the people didn't have much, but gave what they had with full hearts. Alana greeted me with her usual softness, her voice light but not patronizing. "Morning, Clara. I made oatmeal. There's toast and coffee too. No pressure if you want to sleep more." I sat up, pulling the throw blanket tighter around my shoulders. "You're spoiling me," I said, half smiling. "No," she replied, setting the bowl gently in front of me. "This is just how we treat people in this house." It was such a simple sentence, but it hit me like a hymn. I stirred the oatmeal slowly, savoring the smell more than the taste for a moment. Something about her tone made me feel something I hadn't in years worthy. When Malcolm came home from school that afternoon, his shirt sleeves were rolled up and there was chalk dust on his pants. He greeted me with a hug, not caring about the lingering scent of the streets I'd walked or the grime still buried deep in the folds of my clothes. "You look better today," he said. "Because I am," I said softly. We spent that evening in the living room. Alana folded laundry while Malcolm graded papers. I sat on the edge of the couch, watching the ordinary miracle of a couple functioning in love, in sync, without resentment or ego. "What's next for you, Mom?" Malcolm finally asked, putting his pen down. I looked at him carefully, unsure how much to say. I hadn't told them everything yet. They still believed I was ruined, broke, left with nothing. "I don't know," I said. "I've got to find my footing again. Maybe I'll try to get a job." Malcolm looked at me with that same thoughtful frown he used to wear as a child when a puzzle frustrated him. "You don't need to figure everything out right now. It's not round." "You've done enough," I said quickly. "I don't want to stretch you two any thinner." Alana looked up from her laundry pile. "Clara, this isn't a transaction. This is family." I wanted to cry again, but I swallowed it down. Instead, I leaned back and let the quiet hold me. Later that night, I crept into the kitchen after everyone had gone to bed. I stared out the small window above the sink, watching the street lamp flicker. The street outside was quiet. Modest cars parked haphazardly, fences in need of paint. But it was honest. It was home in the truest sense. I picked up my old burner phone, the one I had hidden in the lining of my coat pocket, and made a call. "Robert?" I whispered. A pause. Then, "Clara, Is that you? Thank God. Where are you? I'm safe, I said. But I need you to prepare something for me. What kind of something? A will revision, a public reading. I want my children present, all three. He was quiet for a beat. You're sure? I've never been more certain. And the estate? Unchanged. But they don't need to know that yet. I hung up, tucking the phone away, my hands shaking. Not from cold this time, but from what I was about to do. I wasn't just testing them anymore. I was preparing a mirror, one they couldn't look away from. The next morning, I sat with Alana in the living room while she graded essays. One paper caught her attention. She read the first few lines aloud without realizing she was doing it. Kindness is not measured in what we give when it's easy, but in what we sacrifice when it's hard, she said. That's good, right? It's better than good, I replied. She smiled but didn't look up. It's from a kid whose parents don't speak English. He's had a rough year, but he still turns in his homework, never complains. Sounds familiar, I murmured. She looked at me. What do you mean? I hesitated, then said, You've been kind to me, Alana, not knowing who I really am, not caring. She shifted, suddenly a bit cautious. Who you really are? I shook my head. I just meant, thank you. Truly. She studied me for a moment, her eyes scanning my face. Something was shifting in her. Intuition, maybe. But she didn't press. That afternoon, I offered to help in the garden. Malcolm gave me gloves and a trowel, and we spent an hour pulling weeds and laying fresh mulch around the flower beds. I knelt in the dirt, the sun warming my back, and found myself smiling at the earth beneath my nails. I hadn't touched soil in years, not since Walter died. It felt grounding, honest. Malcolm spoke as he worked. Dad used to say you had a green thumb. He said a lot of things, I replied, my voice tight. He also said you were the strongest woman he ever knew. That made me pause. I don't feel strong, I said. Malcolm looked up at me, dirt on his cheek, sunlight in his eyes. Then maybe strength isn't always about feeling. Maybe it's about what you choose to do next. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about what came next. I had seen the truth now, who my children really were when no one was watching, and I knew, without question, who deserved my legacy. Not because of blood, but because of heart. The reckoning was coming. But first, I would give them all one last chance to see the woman behind the rags. The third night in Malcolm and Alana's house was the hardest so far. Not because of hunger or cold, I had both under control now, but because my heart would not let me rest. When the lights went out and the quiet settled in, the memories came flooding back, uninvited and relentless. I lay on the pull-out couch, staring at the faint crack in the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. Pipes ticked softly. The heater clicked on and off. Somewhere down the hall, Malcolm coughed in his sleep. These were small sounds, ordinary sounds, but they carried more comfort than all the marble halls and security systems I had ever lived behind. And yet, my mind kept dragging me backward. I saw Vanessa as a little girl, standing on a chair in the kitchen, stirring cake batter with her tongue sticking out in concentration. I remembered Troy at 10 years old, running into my office after school, waving a report card like it was a winning lottery ticket. I remembered packing lunches, tying shoes, staying up late sewing costumes for school plays because I refused to let my children feel less than. Where had it gone wrong? Sometime after midnight, I heard quiet movement from the kitchen. I rose slowly, my joints protesting, and cracked the door just enough to see. Alana stood by the counter, her back to me, her shoulders slightly hunched. She was whispering on the phone. Yes, I know, she said softly, but we'll figure it out. We always do. There was a pause. No, I don't regret it, not for a second. If we have to tighten things for a while, we will. Another pause. Then, quieter still, she's his mother. What kind of people would we be if we turned her away? My throat tightened. I stepped back into the shadows before she could see me and closed the door gently. I sat on the edge of the couch, my hands trembling not from fear, but from the unbearable weight of gratitude mixed with guilt. They were already calculating sacrifices. In the morning, Malcolm left early for school. Alana handed him his lunch, kissed him goodbye, and watched through the window until his car turned the corner. Then she turned to me with a careful smile. Clara, she said, Would you like to go for a walk today? Just around the block. Fresh air might help. I nodded. The truth was, I needed to move. My body felt stiff, heavy with thoughts I couldn't outrun. We walked slowly, side by side, past modest houses and cracked sidewalks. Neighbors waved at Alana by name. A woman across the street asked about her mother. A man fixing his fence thanked her for the cookies she dropped off last week. Everywhere we went, she was known not for what she owned, but for how she showed up. Halfway down the block, she stopped suddenly. "Can I ask you something?" she said. I braced myself. "Of course." She hesitated, choosing her words. "Something about your story. It doesn't quite add up." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" She gestured vaguely. "You don't speak like someone who's lived on the street long. You hold yourself differently. And sometimes, when you talk about business, it's like it's second nature to you." I forced a small, tired laugh. Old habits. She studied me for a moment longer, then nodded. "Maybe. I just wanted you to know I'm not asking because I doubt you. I just want to understand." Her restraint undid me more than suspicion ever could have. She wasn't interrogating me. She was offering space. "Thank you," I said quietly. We continued walking. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was thoughtful. That afternoon, while Alana ran errands, I stayed behind to tidy up. I wiped counters, swept floors, folded blankets with care. Each small task felt like an apology written without words. In the bedroom Malcolm and Alana shared, I noticed something that stopped me cold. On the nightstand sat a simple photo frame. Inside was a wedding picture. No grand venue. No designer gown. Just Malcolm in a borrowed suit and Alana in a modest white dress, both smiling like they'd already won something priceless. I traced the edge of the frame with my finger. I had missed this. I had been too busy arranging a proper reception for Vanessa, too focused on impressing Troy's colleagues, too distracted by image to see the quiet joy growing right under my nose. When Alana returned, I found her in the kitchen sorting groceries. "I need to tell you something," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She looked up, attentive. "Okay, I haven't been completely honest with you." She didn't interrupt. She didn't react. She just waited. "I'm not ready to tell you everything yet," I continued. "But I need you to know this. What you and Malcolm have done for me, it matters more than you know. More than anything money could buy." Her eyes softened, but there was no triumph there. No expectation. "We didn't do it for gratitude," she said simply. "We did it because it was right." That word again. Right. That evening, Malcolm came home exhausted. He dropped his bag by the door and sank onto the couch beside me. "Rough day," he sighed. I hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever feel like you chose the harder road?" He thought for a moment. "Sometimes, especially when people look at us like we failed." "And does that bother you?" He smiled faintly. "It used to. Then I realized I sleep at night. I look at my students and know I matter. That's enough." I closed my eyes, letting his words settle deep. That night, alone again with the ceiling crack and the ticking heater, I finally admitted the truth to myself. This wasn't just about exposing my children. It was about exposing me. The mother who had confused success with worth. The woman who had believed money could protect love from decay. The parent who had taught lessons without realizing it. The reckoning was no longer something I feared. It was something I owed. The morning began with the scent of burnt toast. I smiled before I even opened my eyes. That smell had followed me through motherhood, first with Vanessa, as a teenager insisting on making breakfast in bed for Father's Day, then Troy during one of his chef phases in high school, and now here, in this small home, where love tasted like slightly overcooked bread and instant coffee. Alana laughed softly in the kitchen, muttering something about the toaster being temperamental. I pulled the blanket off and stretched. My body still ached from nights of sleeping rough, but each day in this home added a layer of healing that no hospital could provide. I shuffled into the kitchen in my borrowed slippers. Alana poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs and handed one to me. "I owe you new toast," she said. "This one's perfect," I replied, taking a sip. Malcolm entered a few minutes later, holding a stack of papers. "School budget's getting slashed again," he muttered. "We're losing 2 aides and probably the after-school program." Alana frowned. "What about the reading club?" He shook his head. "Gone." I watched him, the way his shoulders drooped just slightly, but his jaw remained tight. He was trying to stay composed, for her, for me. He didn't want to bring that disappointment into our breakfast table. I cleared my throat gently. How much would it cost to keep the program going? They both looked at me. Malcolm blinked. It's not your problem, Mom. I smiled. I didn't ask that. I asked how much. He hesitated, then said, about $7,000 for the rest of the year. I nodded slowly, sipping my coffee. That's not a lot, considering what it does for the kids. I know, Malcolm said, but the district says there's no room, too many other priorities. I didn't push further. Not yet. But I made a mental note to speak to Robert again discreetly. There were ways to support quietly, without revealing myself. I wasn't ready to tear down the mask just yet. After breakfast, Alana invited me to accompany her to the school where she volunteered twice a week. I agreed, curious to see her in her element. She dressed simply, comfortably jeans, a cardigan, and her teacher ID clipped to the front. She packed a peanut butter sandwich and an apple into a brown bag, then offered me one too. Just in case you get hungry, she said with a wink. The school was modest, its hallways lined with construction paper, art, and motivational quotes. A few children waved excitedly when they saw Alana, shouting Miss A with joyful familiarity. She responded to each with a smile or a gentle pat on the shoulder. I sat in the back of the classroom as she led a reading circle. Her voice was patient, warm, never condescending. She treated every child like they mattered, whether they read perfectly or stumbled over every other word. When the class ended, she walked me through the garden behind the building, 4 raised beds filled with herbs and a few winter vegetables, started by the students last season. We've got collards, carrots, thyme, and a stubborn little tomato plant that refuses to give up, she said, brushing her fingers over the leaves. Just like you, I murmured. She glanced at me, surprised, then smiled. Maybe. We sat on a bench near the fence, while the sun peeked through gray clouds. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, I know something's going on. You're not who you say you are. I tensed. You don't have to tell me yet, she added quickly. But I need you to know whatever you're running from, you're safe here. I turned to her, the weight of her words pressing against everything I'd kept buried. I'm not running, I said. Not exactly. I'm watching. Watching what? My legacy. She didn't respond right away. She just looked at me, her expression unreadable. You know, Malcolm never stopped believing in you, she said. Even when he said you were distant or too busy, he always thought you were doing it for the right reasons. I wasn't, I admitted. I was doing it for survival, for status, for control. She nodded slowly. Well, sometimes you don't realize what you've built until it all falls down. That night, back at the house, I sat in the living room with Malcolm as Alana prepared dinner. The news buzzed in the background. A story about layoffs at a major corporation caught my ear, and I felt a familiar pang memories of conference calls, damage control, financial juggling. How did you do it? I asked Malcolm. Do what? Choose this life, this neighborhood, this work. You could have gone into tech or medicine. You were always brilliant. He looked down at the paper in his lap. I didn't want brilliance to be the point. I wanted meaning. I nodded, understanding more than he knew. I'm proud of you, I said. His eyes widened a little. You are? I haven't said it enough. Maybe ever, but I am. He smiled, but it was tinged with something sad. I used to think you didn't notice. I did, I said. I just didn't know how to say it. End quote. Later, in the quiet of the guest room, I called Robert again. It's time, I said. You want to move forward? Yes, but not just with the will. I want a full reading, in person. I want all 3 of them there. You're sure? No, I replied. But it has to be done. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. Vanessa and Troy needed to hear the truth, not just about the will, but about themselves, about what they had shown me when they thought I had nothing. And Malcolm, he deserved more than praise. He deserved to know exactly how much his love, his choices, and his heart had saved me. I woke early the next morning, long before the sun had risen. The house was silent, the kind of silence that only lives in places where people sleep with trust. I lay in the pull-out couch with my eyes wide open, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the quiet rhythm of the world Malcolm and Alana had built. It was time. I knew that now. No more stalling. No more excuses wrapped in fear. The kindness I had received here, in this modest home filled with second-hand furniture and first-rate compassion, had stripped away every layer of pride I had left. All that remained was truth, and it was heavy, but necessary. I got up quietly and moved to the kitchen. The coffee pot hadn't started its usual sputtering yet, so I filled it with water and grounds, pressing the start button like I'd done 1,000 times in another life. When Alana walked in 10 minutes later, still in her robe, she blinked in surprise. "You're up early," she said, rubbing her eyes. "I couldn't sleep." She yawned, reaching for a mug. "Something on your mind?" I didn't answer right away. I poured coffee into her cup, then one for myself, and leaned against the counter. "I've asked my lawyer to arrange something," I said finally. "A meeting. With all my children." Her eyes sharpened slightly, but she stayed quiet. "They need to hear what I've learned," I continued. "What I've seen." Alana sipped slowly. "Is it about the business?" "In a way," I said. "It's about more than money, though. It's about legacy and justice." "Justice? Not the courtroom kind," I added. "The personal kind. The kind we owe each other when no one's watching." She nodded, then studied me. "Are you sure you're ready?" "I'm not," I admitted. "But that's never stopped me before." Later that day, Robert called. The plan was in motion. The meeting would be in 3 days, at the lawyer's office in the city. A neutral place. No luxury, no comfort, just facts. "Will you tell them who you've been staying with?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "I want them to come as they are, without preparing a performance." Robert exhaled. "This could go badly, Clara." "Everything already has," I replied. "Now it needs to go honestly." That night, over dinner, I broke the news to Malcolm and Alana. "I'm going into the city in a few days," I said, pushing a roasted carrot around my plate. "I need to meet with Robert." Malcolm looked up, fork paused mid-air. "You trust him?" "He's handled my estate for 25 years, I said. "I trust him more than most." Alana's eyes met mine across the table. There was no suspicion there, only quiet understanding. "Do you want us to come with you?" she asked. I smiled. "Not this time, but I'll need to talk with you after." "About what comes next." "Here's 84-4, Malcolm nodded. "We'll be here." The next morning, I took a walk alone. I needed air, space, distance. As I moved through the neighborhood, I passed the little park where Malcolm and Alana sometimes volunteered. There were a few kids playing with a deflated basketball, their laughter echoing off the rusted swing sets. It was a good sound, innocent and real. I sat on a bench and watched them. One boy fell and scraped his knee. Another offered a sleeve to wipe the blood away. There it was again. That instinct to care, even when it wasn't required. Where had that gone in Vanessa? In Troy? I didn't blame them entirely. I had shaped them. I had pushed them toward success, toward appearance, toward the kind of perfection that couldn't survive a scratch. I had made kindness optional. I had rewarded image, not integrity. The reckoning wasn't just theirs. It was mine, too. When I returned home, Malcolm was in the backyard, kneeling beside the garden beds. His fingers worked gently in the soil, pulling weeds, patting earth. "You love this," I said, walking over. He looked up, a smudge of dirt on his cheek. "It keeps me sane." "Can I help?" He handed me a small trowel. Always. We worked in silence for a while, side by side. The rhythm of the garden was meditative plant, water, prune. The earth didn't ask who you were or what you owned. It only asked what you gave. "You know," Malcolm said after a while, "Dad used to say you never rested." "Not really." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the soil. "Because I didn't know how." "Do you now?" "I'm learning." He smiled, then reached into the dirt and pulled out a small, ripe tomato from the stubborn plant near the fence. He handed it to me like an offering. "Even the ones you don't expect will grow," he said. That night, I lay awake again, rehearsing what I'd say at the meeting. I knew the risks. Vanessa could lash out. Troy might storm off. The truth could unravel everything. But it was worth it. They needed to know what they had shown me, and what they had lost. And Malcolm needed to know what he had earned. I closed my eyes, one hand resting on my chest, the other still faintly stained with garden soil. 3 days. And then, everything changes. 3 days pass slower than I expected. Each hour crawled by, thick with anticipation. I found myself folding the same towels twice, wiping counters that were already clean, reorganizing a drawer that had nothing to do with me. It wasn't nerves. It was weight, emotional, spiritual. I was preparing not for a confrontation, but a reckoning. Robert sent a car to pick me up that morning. Alana helped me get dressed, choosing a simple navy sweater, slacks that didn't cling too tightly, and a pair of flats that didn't scream wealth but didn't whisper poverty either. My hair was freshly washed. My skin, finally, clean. I looked like a woman who had seen both sides of the mountain and come down quieter, sharper. "Do you want me to go with you?" Alana asked, her hand on my shoulder. I shook my head. "Not yet." She nodded. "Then just know we'll be here when you get back." Malcolm was already at work, but he'd left a note. "Mom, be strong. And be you." The ride to the city was quiet. I watched familiar streets pass through the tinted windows avenues I used to cruise in a luxury car, dressed in tailored suits, scheduling board meetings between martini lunches. Now I sat in the back of a modest black sedan, dressed plainly, feeling older, wiser, and somehow more real than I had in decades. The law office was nestled in a tall brick building downtown. Clean lines, dark wood interiors, polished but not flashy. Robert met me in the lobby, his face a mix of relief and apprehension. "They're here," he said. Vanessa came in first. Troy followed. "They haven't said much." "Good," I said. "They should be surprised." He hesitated. "Clara, you don't have to go through with this if you're not ready." "I'm not ready," I said. "But I'm done waiting." He led me into the conference room. Vanessa sat at the far end of the long table, legs crossed, arms folded, her expression flat and unreadable. Troy sat beside her, scrolling through his phone, barely looking up. They both looked immaculate, controlled, powerful. When I walked in, they both stared. "Mother?" Vanessa said, blinking. What is this?" Troy stood slowly. "Wait, you're the one Robert called us about? The will?" I took my seat at the head of the table and folded my hands neatly in front of me. "Yes," I said calmly. "It's time we had a conversation." Vanessa scoffed. "You could have just called, you know. You didn't need to stage a production." "This isn't a production," I replied. "It's a mirror." They exchanged glances. Robert cleared his throat and began to read from the revised estate documentation. The numbers came first: assets, property, shares. I watched their faces carefully. They didn't react much. Vanessa's poker face held. Troy leaned back, tapping a finger against the chair arm. Then came the caveat. "Before any distribution," Robert said, adjusting his glasses, "Mrs. Jenkins has requested to speak to you both, privately and off record." Vanessa Sehill, "Here we go." I leaned forward slightly, letting my voice drop just enough to still the air. "I disappeared on purpose." Vanessa blinked. Troy's mouth parted slightly. "I left everything behind to see who my children were when no one was looking, when I had nothing, when I needed help." I paused, letting the words hang. "I came to you first, Vanessa." She shifted, eyes narrowing. "I thought you were homeless. You didn't just turn me away. You told me I wasn't your mother anymore." She said nothing. "Troy," I continued, "you tossed food at my feet like I was an animal, told me to get off your porch." His jaw clenched. "I didn't know it was you. You didn't care who it was." The silence in the room became thick, pressing against the windows, the floor, the walls. "I went to Malcolm last. He didn't recognize me either, but he brought me in, fed me, gave me a bed, asked for nothing." Vanessa leaned forward. "So what? This was some twisted social experiment?" "No," I said. "It was a reckoning, for all of us." Robert stepped forward and laid down a folder in front of each of them. "In these documents," he said, "you'll find the new terms of the estate." Vanessa opened hers with a sharp flick. "As of today," Robert continued, "Malcolm is the primary beneficiary. He will receive the family home, 70% of the shares in Jenkins Foods, and full rights to the Jenkins Foundation Fund." Troy sat up straight. "You're joking." 20% will go to Alana," Robert continued, "for reasons stated in the enclosed letter." Vanessa stood. "You can't be serious. Malcolm is a schoolteacher. He doesn't know anything about business. He knows everything about humanity, I said. Something you both failed to show when it mattered most. Great. This is ridiculous, Vanessa snapped. You've lost your mind. I stood now, slowly. What I lost was my illusion, about what kind of people I raised. Troy opened his mouth, but I cut him off. Don't tell me you were busy. Don't tell me you didn't know. The truth is, you saw someone struggling and decided it wasn't your problem. Robert stepped back. I looked them both in the eye. You have two choices now. Accept the terms and walk the road toward repair. Or contest it, and watch the public learn how you treated your mother when she was in need. They both sat in silence. I gathered my coat and walked to the door. Before I left, I said, you cared more about what I could give you than who I was. Malcolm loved me when he thought I had nothing. That's the difference. Outside, the cold air stung my cheeks, but I welcomed it. I had walked into that room unsure if I'd have the strength to finish. I walked out knowing I had only just begun. I didn't return home right away. Instead, I asked the driver to take the long way, through the city's old neighborhoods, past the places I once knew by name and now barely recognized. Chain stores where family diners used to be. Office towers where corner laundromats stood. I leaned my head against the cool window glass and let the weight of the morning settle into my bones. The confrontation had gone as expected, but not without cost. Watching the faces of my own children twist in disbelief, in anger, in entitlement, wasn't easy. Vanessa's eyes burned with betrayal. Troy's lips trembled with restrained fury. They didn't understand. Or maybe they did, and that was worse. I had held a mirror to their faces, and what they saw terrified them. By the time the car pulled into Malcolm's neighborhood, the late afternoon sun was turning gold against the rooftops. I could already see Alana's silhouette through the window, pacing the living room with her phone pressed to her ear. Malcolm's car was still in the driveway, dusted with the beginnings of autumn leaves. I opened the door before the driver could come around. As I stepped inside, Alana rushed toward me. "You're back," she said, setting the phone down. "How did it go?" I took a deep breath. Exactly the way it needed to. Malcolm appeared from the hallway, eyes full of unspoken questions. "Sit down," I said. "Both of you. There's something you need to hear." They exchanged glances, then sat on the worn couch, giving me the kind of attention that demanded honesty. I stood in front of them and tried to find the right words. First, I said, I owe you both the truth. Not pieces, not the watered-down version, the real thing. Alana reached out and took Malcolm's hand. "I wasn't bankrupt," I said. "I never lost the company. I never lost the house. I wasn't on the street because I had no choice." They stared at me. Not in shock, but in stillness. I left on purpose. I needed to know who my children really were when I had nothing to offer but myself. Malcolm didn't speak, but I saw the breath leave his lungs slowly. I showed up to Vanessa's. She slammed the door in my face, told me I wasn't her mother anymore. Troy gave me $20 and told me to go to a shelter. They failed that test. End quote. End quote. You can't know, quote. Alana's mouth parted slightly, but she didn't interrupt. "Then I came here," I continued, not knowing what to expect. "And you, both of you, you didn't ask questions. You didn't measure my worth. You just opened the door." Malcolm finally spoke. "You lied to us." "Yes," I said without flinching. "And I'm sorry. I know it was manipulative. I know it was unfair in its own way. But I was desperate, not for money, for truth." He nodded slowly, processing, but not retreating. Alana spoke next. "And the meeting today? I made it official," I said. "The estate has been amended. You, Malcolm, are now the primary heir to the Jenkins family assets and foundation. Alana, you are named as co-trustee." Alana gasped. "What?" "You've proven yourselves in the only currency that matters to me now, character, compassion, integrity." "But we don't want your money," Malcolm said, standing now. "We never did." "I know," I replied, "and that's exactly why you deserve it. This is no day." Alana stood too, shaking her head. "This is too much. We're not built for this." "You're built for better," I said. "And this isn't a gift. It's an investment in the kind of future I should have believed in all along." Malcolm paced a few steps before turning to me. "What about Vanessa and Troy?" "They'll get a chance to redeem themselves," I said. The inheritance isn't stripped away forever, but it's conditional now. 3 years. Therapy, community service, regular reviews, into court, and quote, it's braided menser. Alana raised an eyebrow. You're giving them homework? I chuckled. Exactly. We all stood there in silence for a moment, 3 people stitched together by blood and something stronger. Truth. Finally, Alana reached for my hand. You stayed with us, shared our meals, slept on our couch, worked in our garden. You could have revealed this at any time. I needed to be sure, I said, and I needed to feel human again. Malcolm stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. You are, Mom, and you always were. I closed my eyes and let myself be held. That night, we shared dinner at the small kitchen table. Nothing fancy, chicken stew, cornbread, a bottle of wine Malcolm pulled from a dusty cabinet. We laughed, we cried, we told stories that weren't sanitized for comfort. Later, after Alana went to bed, Malcolm and I sat on the back steps, looking out at the stars. The air was cooler now, the edge of fall brushing against our skin. I don't know what to do with it all, he said softly. You'll figure it out, I replied. You have something I didn't when I started. What's that? Wisdom before wealth. He looked at me, a small smile tugging at his lips. And what about you? I exhaled. I have peace, for the first time in years. And I meant it. Because even though the reckoning had cost me dearly, it had also returned something priceless faith in the simple, powerful goodness I once overlooked. 2 days after the meeting at Robert's office, the emails began. First from Troy, then Vanessa. The first lines were carefully crafted lawyerly, calculated, like they still believed they could reason their way back into my favor if they just used the right tone. Troy's came first. Mother, I acknowledge that our last interaction was regrettable. If I had known it was you, I would have responded differently. I was under extreme work stress at the time and lacked the clarity I normally maintain in high-pressure situations. Vanessa's followed. I was blindsided by the dramatic nature of your return. I am still struggling to process what you did. That said, I believe we can find a way to move forward civilly, especially given the long-standing professional reputation of our family. Not a single word of apology. No mention of compassion, no admission of failure, just damage control. I read them both on Malcolm's old laptop at the kitchen table, Alana baking muffins behind me, humming faintly under her breath. I closed the lid quietly and leaned back in the chair. They wrote to you, Alana said, not looking up. Yes. Anything worth reading? Only if I were grading them on public relations. She chuckled, placing the muffin tin on the counter. I'm guessing they haven't quite gotten the message yet. No, I said, but they will. I have want to. That afternoon, I called Robert. Let's proceed, I said. Send the next letter. You sure? He asked. Yes. Attach the conditions. Detail the requirements. I want them to see this isn't about punishment. It's about transformation. And if they refuse, they're free to walk away. He paused, then said, Clara, you've changed. I hope so, I said. That was the point. When I hung up, I looked out the window to the backyard. Malcolm was mowing the lawn in his old sneakers, earbuds in, face calm, focused. It hit me all at once how different his energy was from his siblings. Where they bristled with ambition, Malcolm radiated steadiness, not stagnant, rooted. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Alana brought out a basket of fresh muffins and a thermos of tea. Let's take these to the community center, she said. I blinked. Why? They're short on snacks for the after-school tutoring kids. Figured we'd drop these off, say hi. You don't have to come, but I think you'd like it. I hesitated, then nodded. Let me grab my coat. The community center was nothing impressive from the outside chipped paint, flickering overhead lights, a parking lot with more cracks than asphalt. But inside, it pulsed with life. Kids worked on homework in clusters. Teens played basketball in the adjacent gym, and volunteers buzzed from room to room with clipboards and smiles. When Alana handed the basket to a young woman at the front desk, she beamed. You always come through, Alana. Thank you. Clara helped, Alana added, nudging me gently. The woman turned to me. Thank you, ma'am. We appreciate every bit. I nodded, feeling a strange warmth rise in my chest. No one here knew who I was. No one cared. Yet I mattered. Not because of my money, because I showed up. As we left, I glanced at the bulletin board by the door. A flyer caught my eye. Mentors needed. Help shape tomorrow. I took one. Back at home, Malcolm was setting the table. I handed him the flyer. "What's this?" he asked. "Something I'm thinking about," I said. "Might be time I gave back in a different way." He studied me for a moment, then smiled. "You'd be great at it." "I don't know," I said. "I've made a lot of mistakes. Maybe that's what makes you great." "It's not now," and it goed. Later that night, I found myself in the guest room with the lights off, holding the old family photo album I had found in a dusty storage bin earlier that day. Inside were images of birthdays, beach trips, piano recitals, pictures of Vanessa with frosting on her nose, Troy hugging a soccer trophy, Malcolm asleep in my arms at age 4. They were beautiful and painful. I had tried to build a life of strength and protection, but in doing so, I had raised children who measured love by usefulness. Except one. Malcolm had always been the soft one, sensitive, emotional. I had worried it would break him. Instead, it had saved him. And now, it had saved me. The next morning, I stood on the back porch with a mug of tea and watched the sunrise. Alana joined me, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. "You're quiet today," she said. "I'm thinking about what comes next." She sipped her tea. "You know, it doesn't have to be grand." "What do you mean?" "The next thing. It doesn't have to be dramatic or world-changing. It can just be kind." That word again. Kind. The one I'd overlooked for years in favor of powerful, impressive, strategic. Kind had outlasted them all. I smiled, nodded, and said, "Then let's start there." The following week moved with a quiet rhythm. No meetings, no press, no boardroom whispers or crises to manage. For the first time in decades, my calendar was empty, and it felt like air returning to my lungs after years of tightness. I spent the early mornings walking through Malcolm's neighborhood, nodding at dog walkers and retired couples tending to their porches. There was a grace in their routine, a kind of quiet nobility in lives built on modesty and mutual respect. No one knew me here. No one cared about my surname, my assets, my resume, and that anonymity was its own kind of peace. But peace, I knew, was never permanent. A knock came on the door one Thursday afternoon, while Alana was at the school and Malcolm was still at work. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened it, expecting a neighbor or delivery. Instead, I found Vanessa. She looked different. Not disheveled, not broken, but stripped. Her makeup was minimal, her jewelry subtle. She wore flats instead of heels, and she held nothing in her hands. No purse, no phone, no performance. I stepped aside wordlessly, and she entered. The air between us was thick, and I led her to the kitchen where the light was softer. She sat stiffly, her posture defensive, as if preparing for battle. "I didn't come to argue," she said quickly. "I came because I don't understand." I raised an eyebrow. "What don't you understand, Vanessa?" She looked down at her hands, then back up at me. "You tested us." "I did." "You humiliated us." "No, Vanessa," I said. "You did that to yourselves." Active ender. Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "I don't want your money," she said. I waited. "I don't want Malcolm's either. I just want to know, when did you stop believing in me?" Her voice cracked slightly at the end. That disarmed me more than I expected. "I never stopped believing in the girl who used to sing to her dolls and try to sell lemonade in the driveway," I said. "But somewhere along the way you became someone else. Someone who built walls so high, even I couldn't reach you. I was Will. I had to survive," she whispered. "You made us compete, for attention, for approval." I swallowed hard. "I know. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to matter." "You mattered," I said. "But I didn't show you in the right way. I thought preparing you for the world meant making you hard." We sat in silence. Then she asked, "Do you still think there's hope for me?" I took a long breath. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you're willing to learn kindness the hard way, the slow way, not in charity galas or PR campaigns, but in picking up groceries for a neighbor, listening to someone with no credentials, making room for softness." Vanessa nodded slowly, absorbing it. "I'm willing," she said, "but I don't know how. Start by showing up, not just for me, but for people who can't offer you anything." She stood then, a little unsure of herself. I don't expect forgiveness overnight. I don't offer it overnight, I said. But I offer the door. Asked her. She nodded, walked to the front, and paused. Tell Alana, thank you, for taking you in when I didn't. I will. When the door closed behind her, I sat down and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. That evening, I told Alana about the visit. She listened without judgment. She's trying, I said. In her own way. She always wanted your approval, Alana replied gently. Maybe now she's learning how to earn your respect. We both fell quiet. Then she added, Troy called the house today, left a message. I looked at her. He asked if he could visit. I nodded slowly. Then it's his turn. The next day, Troy arrived. He came alone, walking from a modest rental car, dressed in slacks and a jacket. He looked less polished than usual, tired. We sat on the back porch, just the two of us. I deserved everything you said, he started. You did, he nodded. And it's haunted me. Not just the money, not just the will, what I saw in your eyes that day. I've never seen you look at me like that. That was the first time I wasn't looking through a mother's eyes, I said. I was looking through a human being's. He lowered his head. I forgot what that looked like. I didn't reply. I want to do better, he continued. Not just for the inheritance, for myself. I studied him. Then start where your brother did. Volunteer. Listen. Stop trying to fix people and start trying to understand them. I do, Nate. He smiled faintly. That sounds harder than surgery. It is, I said, but it saves more lives. When he left, I returned to the garden. The tomato plant had finally bloomed, red and plump, imperfect but proud. Alana joined me, a pair of gloves in her hand. It's growing. I nodded. So are they. She looked at me. So are you. For the first time in years, I felt it too. It was a Thursday evening when the letter arrived. I recognized the envelope immediately, Robert's elegant stationery, my name written in his assistant's tidy hand. I opened it slowly at the kitchen table, heart steady but curious. Alana was in the living room reading, and Malcolm was due home any minute. Inside was the official confirmation. Vanessa and Troy had both accepted the terms of the conditional inheritance. They would begin mandatory family therapy next month, complete 40 hours of community service each quarter, and submit biannual reflection letters to the Jenkins Foundation, detailing their contributions to others without financial incentive. The signatures were there. Real. Shaky, maybe, but signed all the same. I folded the letter and stared out the window. The sky was streaked with pale orange and the last blush of a quiet day. A bird landed on the fence, fluttered once, then flew off again. Is that from Robert? Alana asked, walking into the kitchen with her book in hand. I nodded. It's done. They've agreed. She set her book on the table and sat across from me. How do you feel? Relieved, I said, but also sad. She tilted her head. I had to break something sacred to get here, I continued. Motherhood was supposed to be about protection. Instead, I exposed them. I exposed myself. There's an Christed no today, and Christed munder that work in zero, and very talk snowed. But you told them the truth, she said. And now they have a chance to be better. I hope they take it. Malcolm came in just as the conversation was settling. He dropped his bag on the chair, kissed Alana's cheek, and poured himself a glass of water. Long day, he muttered. 12 parent-teacher conferences, 11 complaints, 1 actual thank you. You're doing holy work, I said. He smiled tiredly. Sometimes it just feels like babysitting adults. And to spare it. We shared dinner, a hearty stew Alana made with garden carrots and lentils. The table was small, the lighting soft, the laughter real. There were no wine glasses clinking, no catered platters, no elegant centerpieces. Just 3 people sharing a meal, anchored in something deeper than performance. Afterward, Malcolm pulled out a puzzle box from the hall closet. I started this last week, he said, shaking the box. Thought it might be fun. I laughed. You and your puzzles. I'm Seether Infighted Arcus. I like making sense out of messes, he replied. We spent the next hour around the coffee table, trying to fit oddly shaped pieces into a growing landscape of sky and pine trees. Alana made tea. The television murmured in the background, but no one really watched it. When we paused for the night, I wandered out to the back steps with my cup. The garden was quiet, flowers drooping under the weight of evening dew. A light breeze stirred the air, and that's when it hit me. I wasn't just healing. I was becoming someone new. Not the CEO, not the matriarch, not the polished woman with answers and a Rolodex of power. Just Clara, a woman rediscovering her place in the world through honesty, humility, and the hearts of two people she once misjudged. Alana joined me a few minutes later, wrapping her shawl tight. "Do you regret giving them another chance?" she asked. I thought about it. "No," I said. "Not yet." She nodded. "I think they'll surprise you. I'm 7 Talges. I hope they surprise themselves." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the distant sounds of the city, the occasional car, a barking dog, wind rustling dry leaves. Then she said, "I was scared of you once." I looked at her, surprised. "You had this way of looking through people," she said, "like they were on trial." "I used to live like that," I admitted. "Every room a courtroom, every conversation a negotiation. And now? Now I'm trying to learn the language of gentleness. Readers and a 6y. Alana smiled. "You're doing pretty well." The next morning, I received another letter, this one handwritten. From Vanessa. The handwriting was neat, but less controlled than usual. There were crossed-out words, pauses, honesty. She wrote about childhood, about pressure, about feeling like she had to become someone in order to matter. She apologized not perfectly, not poetically, but sincerely. Near the end, she wrote, "You were right. I saw your need and turned away. I don't want to be that woman anymore. I'm working on it. Thank you for the mirror, painful as it was." I folded the letter and held it to my chest. Later, I walked down to the community center. The same flyer still hung on the bulletin board. Mentors needed, help shape tomorrow. I tore off one of the contact tabs and signed up that afternoon. At the orientation the following week, a young woman named Raina greeted me with a clipboard. "You're here to mentor?" she asked. I nodded. "Any experience?" I smiled. "Some, but I'm here to learn too." She grinned. "That's the best kind." We walked through the halls together. Children buzzed around us. Laughter echoed from every corner. There were no resumes here, no stock portfolios, no title plaques. Only possibility. And I had never felt more at home. Mentorship at the community center began with chaos. Beautiful, noisy, unfiltered chaos. The children were between 10 and 14, each with their own bundle of energy, attitude, and expectation. My first day, I arrived in slacks and a cardigan, clipboard in hand, assuming I'd bring structure and guidance with the ease of a former executive. What I found instead was a room full of skeptical eyes, folded arms, and whispers behind hands. They didn't care about my past life. They didn't even know it. All they saw was another adult trying to help. I was paired with a girl named Lila, age 12. She had sharp eyes, a messy bun, and an obvious distrust of grown-ups. She didn't say much at first, just nodded, shrugged, or gave one-word answers. I asked her what she liked. "Nothing," she said. I asked what she hated. "Everything," she replied. And then I asked her if she liked snacks. She looked up. "Depends." "On what?" "Whether you brought any." That broke the ice. By the end of the session, she'd eaten 2 chocolate chip granola bars and told me about her younger brother, who always borrowed her pencils, and her dream of becoming an illustrator. The next week, she brought one of her sketchbooks. I flipped through the pages with care, marveling at how much emotion she captured with so few lines. "You're talented," I said. She shrugged again, but I saw the corners of her mouth twitch upward. Outside the center, my days fell into a gentle rhythm. I spent mornings helping Alana in the garden, afternoons preparing meals with Malcolm when he wasn't grading papers. Vanessa called twice that week, once to ask about volunteer opportunities, and once just to ask how I was. Troy hadn't called yet, but Robert confirmed he'd begun the community service program in his area. He was working with a nonprofit that helped former inmates reintegrate far outside his comfort zone and exactly where he needed to be. One evening, as I was folding laundry with Alana, she asked, "Do you ever miss it?" "Miss what?" "The life you had before, the company, the status, the control." I considered her question carefully. "I miss the illusion that I was untouchable," I said. "I miss the way people deferred to me without question. but I don't miss who I was while I had all that." She nodded. "You don't talk much about your husband." I smiled faintly. "He was brilliant and broken. He taught me how to build an empire, but never how to share it." "Did you love him?" "I loved the idea of him, and I think he loved the version of me that never asked for softness." We continued folding in silence. That weekend, the community center held a small event: pizza, games, a slideshow of student artwork. Lila's drawings were among them. She'd chosen 3 pieces, one of her family, one of a treehouse she imagined, and one of an older woman watering flowers. She didn't say it was me. She didn't have to. After the event, I stepped outside to call Robert. "How are you, Clara?" he asked. "I'm well. How's the mentoring?" "Humbling," I said, "and healing." "I'm glad," he said. "There's something else, though. The press found out." I stiffened. "About the inheritance?" "No. About you. Where you've been. What you did. It's going to be a feature piece. Human interest story. Wealthy CEO vanishes, tests children, rewards kindness. That kind of thing." I closed my eyes. "Who leaked it?" "Vanessa. I think she did it to clear the air. Her PR firm spun it well. You don't come out looking cruel, just complicated." "Which I am." "Do you want to make a statement?" "No," I said. "Let the story breathe. Let it live without my hand controlling it." He paused. "That's growth," I chuckled. "It's exhaustion." That night, I sat outside with Malcolm again. The puzzle was nearly finished on the coffee table inside, and he brought out 2 cups of cocoa, setting one beside me. "Alana told me about the article," he said. I nodded. "It's fine. They're going to have opinions." "They always did." He took a sip. "You ever think about moving on? From here? From all of it? Selling the company, retiring for good, finding something quieter?" "I already found it," I said. He looked at me. "This life," I continued, "right here, with you and Alana, in this house, at the community center, folding towels, listening instead of leading." He smiled. "You really are changing." "I hope so." "Even the tomato plant survived," he added, nodding toward the garden. "If it can change, so can we." I laughed, louder than I had in weeks. He grinned. "You know, it's weird seeing you laugh like that." I forgot I could. We sat there, not needing to say anything more. The crickets sang softly in the distance, and the warm night wrapped around us like an old memory, one I never wanted to forget. The morning the article went live, I woke to a dozen voicemails. Old colleagues, distant friends, former competitors. People I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly reaching out, offering congratulations, confusion, praise, or carefully veiled curiosity. A few asked for interviews. One even suggested a book deal. I didn't return a single call. Instead, I brewed a pot of coffee, buttered a slice of toast, and sat on the back steps, letting the cool air settle against my skin. The sky was soft and gray, the kind of morning that invited reflection. Malcolm emerged a while later with his tablet in hand. He offered a sheepish smile. "It's everywhere," he said. "Even the school secretary mentioned it." "I expected as much," I replied, taking a slow sip. "They're calling it a reverse fairy tale, the CEO who became a beggar to find her worthy heir." I winced. "Dramatic. True, though," he said. "In its way." I looked out over the garden. I didn't want this attention. I just wanted to know who my children were. "And now the whole world knows who you are." "Not really," I said. "They know the version wrapped in a headline." Later that afternoon, while Alana was grocery shopping and Malcolm grading papers, a car pulled up outside. It wasn't a delivery van or a neighbor. It was Vanessa. Again. She stepped out wearing jeans, flats, and a simple white blouse. No jewelry, no assistant trailing her, no designer handbag. Just Vanessa. I opened the door before she knocked. She held up a paper bag. "Lunch?" I nodded and stepped aside. We sat at the kitchen table, spreading out sandwiches and 2 bottled lemonades. She opened hers and took a sip, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm not here because of the article," she said. "I didn't expect it to get that kind of traction." "But you wanted control of the narrative," I said. "Yes," she admitted. "But after reading it, I felt exposed. Not by what you said, by what I saw in myself." She looked down at her sandwich. People are calling me brave for speaking out. They don't know I was the one who slammed the door. I reached across the table and touched her hand. They don't need to know everything. What matters is what you do next. End quote. She looked up at me, her eyes softer than I remembered. I want to do more than donate, she said. I want to work, really work, with the foundation, with Malcolm, with you, if you'll let me. I studied her face. Are you willing to be the student now? I asked. She nodded. Yes. I'm tired of pretending to know everything. I smiled. Good. Then let's begin. The next day, I brought her to the community center. Alana met us at the door, surprised but gracious. She showed Vanessa around, introduced her to the staff, the students, the rhythm of the place. At first, Vanessa hovered uncertain, slightly stiff, but after a while, she began asking questions. Real ones. What do the kids need most? She asked Raina, the young woman who managed programming. Consistency, Raina said without hesitation. Most of them don't get that anywhere else. Vanessa nodded. Then I'll be here. Every Tuesday. You can count on it. Raina arched an eyebrow. Even if no cameras show up? Vanessa smiled. Especially then. That evening, the three of us, Vanessa, Alana, and I sat on the porch with mugs of mint tea. I never imagined this, Vanessa said, gazing at the stars. The three of us, like this. Neither did I, Alana said. But life's full of surprises. Vanessa turned to me. Mom, did you ever really forgive me? I thought for a long moment. I forgave the girl who used to braid her doll's hair and leave notes in my purse. I forgave the woman who got lost in a world of performance, and I forgive the version of you sitting here, trying to come home. Vanessa blinked, emotion flickering behind her eyes. Thank you. You're still becoming, I said. We all are. The following week, I received a letter from Troy. Not typed, not emailed, a real letter. He wrote about his community service, about the first time he listened to a man fresh out of prison talk about losing his kids. Troy said it changed him, humbled him. He wrote, For the first time in my life, I wasn't the smartest person in the room, and I didn't want to be. I just wanted to learn. Thank you for forcing me to look at myself, even when it hurt. I folded the letter and placed it beside Vanessa's in my small drawer of things worth keeping. That Sunday, we all gathered at Malcolm's house. Alana cooked, Malcolm grilled, and for the first time in over a year, all three of my children sat at the same table. No arguments. No power plays. Just a family. Halfway through dinner, Malcolm raised his glass. To change, he said, and to the woman who made it unavoidable. Everyone turned to me. I raised my glass, too. To kindness, I said, the hardest currency, and the only one that lasts. We drank. We laughed. And in that small, cluttered kitchen, I felt it again, that impossible thing I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm I never thought I'd crave. Mornings in the garden with Alana, afternoons at the community center with Lila and a few new students, evenings around Malcolm and Alana's table, now often joined by Vanessa. The house, once quiet and hesitant, now pulsed with conversation, music, and laughter rough around the edges, but real. Troy hadn't visited in person yet, but he called regularly. His tone was different now, not performative or rushed. He spoke slowly, asked questions, even listened. He told me he'd started attending group meetings with some of the men from the nonprofit where he volunteered. It's like therapy, he said once, but less couches and more honesty. He sounded lighter, not fixed, but finally in motion. One Tuesday morning, I arrived at the community center early. Lila was already there, sitting on the floor, her sketchbook open on her lap. You're early, I said, setting down my bag. She looked up and grinned. Couldn't sleep. Had an idea. I haven't brought it. She held up the page. It was a drawing of the community garden behind the center-raised beds, sunflowers, kids bent over watering cans. In the corner was a woman in a sun hat and cardigan. Me. I blinked. It's not done, she said quickly, still shading. It's beautiful, I whispered. She looked proud but shrugged. It's just lines. No, I said. It's love. That afternoon, while sorting supplies in one of the back rooms, Raina pulled me aside. We're applying for a grant, she said. to expand programming, bring in new mentors, update the building. I wanted to ask, would you speak on our behalf? I blinked. Me? You've lived both lives, she said. You can bridge the gap. I hesitated. Won't my name bring attention? Exactly, she said, the kind we need. So that Friday, I stood in front of a small audience of potential donors and local officials at a folding table with a jug of iced tea and a tray of cookies. No stage, no podium, just truth. I told them about Lila, about the garden, about the quiet courage it took for a child to trust again. I didn't mention my company or my wealth. I didn't need to. I ended with this. I spent most of my life building towers, and it took losing everything to learn that real strength lives at the roots. You have a chance today to water those roots. Not with money, with presence. After the applause faded and the chairs scraped back, Raina hugged me hard. You crushed it, she whispered. That night, at dinner, Vanessa asked if she could come visit the center next week. I want to see what you've built, she said. Malcolm smiled. Prepare to sweat. It's not all speeches and hugs. I know, she said. That's why I want to go. Later, after everyone had left and Alana was upstairs with a book, Malcolm and I sat on the porch, nursing mugs of tea. Think you'll ever move back into the old house? He asked. I thought about the sprawling estate, the sterile hallways, the view no one ever looked at because they were too busy performing. No, I said. It's not home anymore. You sure? I'm more sure of who I am here than I ever was in that place. He nodded, then said, We could always convert the garage into a tiny studio for you. I laughed. Is that your way of saying I've overstayed my welcome? He grinned. No, it's my way of saying I hope you never leave. End in quote. The next day, I received a letter in the mail, handwritten, from someone named Marjorie. I didn't recognize the name at first, but as I read, the pieces came together. Marjorie had once been one of my assistants. She left quietly after a particularly harsh day, and I hadn't thought about her since. I saw the article, she wrote. I cried when I read it, because the woman in that story wasn't the one I worked for, but maybe she's the one you always were underneath. I just wanted to say thank you for changing. It gives people like me hope that the past doesn't have to define us forever. I held the letter for a long time, and that night, I wrote back. A real letter, with my own hand, my own words. Dear Marjorie, I began. You're right. I wasn't that woman then, but I'm trying every day to become her now. Because change, I had learned, wasn't a switch. It was a series of small, deliberate choices, again and again, and every one of them mattered. By the time Vanessa walked into the community center the following Tuesday, it was buzzing with the usual symphony of kids, scuffed sneakers squeaking on tile floors, laughter bouncing off concrete walls, and the sharp smell of washable markers. She hesitated in the doorway, her posture a bit too straight, her blouse a bit too crisp. But her face was open. I walked over and touched her arm gently. Come on, I said. Let's meet Lila. Okay. We found Lila in her usual spot by the window, legs crossed, sketchbook balanced on her knees. She looked up, wary at first, then nodded when I introduced Vanessa. You're the one in the suit who made the news, Lila said flatly. Vanessa blinked. Guilty. Lila stared at her, unblinking. You here to watch or to work? I stifled a grin. Vanessa knelt beside her. To work. That answer earned her a nod of approval. Just one. But it was enough. By the end of the afternoon, Vanessa had read aloud to 3 second graders, organized a shelf of mismatched books, and perhaps most notably gotten splattered with glue and glitter while helping make papier-mâché animals. She looked over at me once, near the end, hands sticky, mascara faintly smudged, and said under her breath, This is harder than any board meeting I've ever attended. I leaned in. You're doing better than you think. She gave a half-laugh, half-sigh. I never realized how loud children were, only when they feel safe. On the drive back to Malcolm's, Vanessa was quiet. She stared out the window, her brows drawn. You okay? I asked. She nodded. Yeah, just thinking. About? She took a breath. I spent so long trying to prove I belonged in a room, any room, that I was the smartest, the sharpest, the one no one could dismiss. I watched her carefully. But today, not one of those kids cared about my resume, she continued. They just wanted someone to sit with them, to listen. I smiled. And you did. Back at the house, Malcolm and Alana were prepping dinner. The kitchen smelled like roasted garlic and thyme. Vanessa joined in without prompting, chopping vegetables, laughing at Alana's teasing, even humming along to the old jazz station playing on the radio. After dinner, we sat on the porch again, the four of us. It was quiet, comfortable. Then Vanessa turned to Malcolm. I read your proposal. He looked up, surprised. For the education initiative? Yes, she said. It's brilliant, and I think I can help you fund it. Malcolm tilted his head. You want to back it? Not just with money, she said. With access. With partnerships. I still know people. They'll listen if I'm the one asking. He considered her for a moment, then nodded. Okay, let's do it. Something shifted in the air, then an unspoken bridge built between siblings long estranged. Alana watched them both, then turned to me. You should see the garden tomorrow. The collards are nearly ready. I'll pick them in the morning, I said, before it gets too hot. Vanessa smiled. Maybe I'll join you. The next day, she did. We stood side by side in the early light, soil soft beneath our feet, dew still clinging to the leaves. Vanessa worked carefully, her movements unsure but gentle. Feels like therapy, she said. It is. Wintel and Sprazit. When we returned to the kitchen with baskets full of greens, Alana clapped her hands. Perfect timing. I was just starting breakfast. We cooked together grits, eggs, cornbread, sautéed greens with garlic. Vanessa set the table. Malcolm poured the coffee. No one gave instructions. We just moved as one. That afternoon, while Malcolm napped and Alana tended to the laundry, Vanessa and I sat quietly in the living room. She picked up a framed photo from the bookshelf, one from years ago, back when all three children were still small, gathered around me in the old house. I barely remember this day, she said. I do, I replied. It was your birthday. You cried because the cake had pink frosting instead of purple. She laughed, a soft sound. That sounds about right. She set the photo down gently. I can't undo what I did, she said, but I can show you who I want to be now. I nodded. That's all I ever wanted. Outside, the sun was setting. A soft orange glow poured through the window, bathing everything in a golden hue. Vanessa looked around the room at the worn furniture, the books, the puzzles, the warmth. I never thought I'd envy this life, she said. It's not perfect, I told her. But it's honest. She nodded. That's what I'm after now. And in that moment, I believed her. Because the greatest gift wasn't inheritance or wealth or a second chance. It was clarity, and she had finally found it. Troy arrived unannounced. It was late afternoon, and the house was quiet. Alana was out with a friend, Malcolm still at school. I was in the garden, trimming the wild sage that had started climbing the fence, when I heard the sound of gravel crunching under tires. I turned and saw him step out of a modest silver sedan. He wasn't wearing a suit, just jeans, a gray sweatshirt, and a ball cap pulled low. Troy, I said, brushing dirt from my gloves. This is a surprise. He walked slowly, cautiously, as if unsure how welcome he'd be. Can we talk? I nodded and led him to the back steps. I poured us both lemonade from the fridge. He sat beside me, silent for a long moment. I almost didn't come, he said finally. I wondered if you would. He looked out at the garden. I've been going to the meetings, volunteering, listening. I nodded. Robert told me. He exhaled. At first I hated it. I felt judged, like everyone knew I was there because I'd failed. That's part of growth, I said gently, facing who you were without flinching. He nodded. Last week a man I'd been helping got a job, his first one in 6 years. He came back to the center just to say thank you, and when he saw me he hugged me, just like that, no hesitation. Troy looked down at his hands. No one's hugged me without expecting something in a long time. I placed my hand over his. Then maybe you're finally becoming the man who deserves it. He blinked, hard. I was angry at you, he admitted. For the test, for making me look at myself like that. I was angry at myself too, I said. For raising children who could look through pain and not see a person. He nodded. I see her now. That woman on my porch, hungry, humiliated. She was me, I said. but she was also every forgotten person who needed kindness. Troy turned to me, his voice low. "Can I come back?" "You never left," I replied. "You just had to find your way home." We sat there in silence, letting the cool breeze move around us. Then, as if no time had passed, Troy stood and asked, "Need help in the garden?" I handed him the clippers. "Start with the lavender, it's growing wild." He worked beside me for the next hour, quiet, steady. There was no speech, no grand moment, just a sun, slowly returning to the rhythm of humility. That evening, Malcolm came home and froze in the doorway when he saw Troy sitting at the table. "Hey," Troy said, standing awkwardly. Malcolm didn't smile. Not right away, but he nodded. "Grab a plate," he said. Alana made lasagna. Troy's eyes widened. "Seriously?" "She cooks when she's nervous," Malcolm said, smirking. "I'm not nervous," Alana shouted from the kitchen. We all laughed, even me. Dinner was cautious but cordial. Troy complimented the lasagna. Vanessa texted halfway through, asking if she could stop by later. I said yes. That night, all 3 of my children were under one roof for the first time in years. We sat around the kitchen table, Vanessa talking about her new mentorship program, Troy sharing a story from the re-entry center, Malcolm quietly listening, smiling at the corners of their stories. Alana passed around slices of pie, and for a moment, the years of resentment, misunderstanding, and silence lifted. "This is weird," Troy said, cutting into his slice. "Good, weird, or bad weird?" Vanessa asked. "Good," he admitted. "Like, maybe we're getting it right." Malcolm raised his glass of water. "To getting it right." We all clinked glasses, a soft chorus of hope. After they left that night, I stood in the doorway and looked out at the stars. Alana joined me, resting her head on my shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. "No," I said. "We did." Because this wasn't just my story anymore. It was theirs too. And for the first time, we were writing it together. Spring came slowly that year, but it came with purpose. The flowers in Alana's garden bloomed with a kind of stubborn joy, crocuses breaking through the last patches of frost, tulips unfolding like they'd been holding their breath all winter. The air grew sweeter, the days stretched longer, and for the first time in many years, I found myself looking forward instead of back. Vanessa's mentorship initiative launched in April. She hosted her first workshop at the community center, helping teenage girls explore leadership through storytelling and public speaking. She no longer wore the armor of polished blazers or the stilettos that had once defined her. Instead, she came in jeans and flats, her hair pulled back, her focus clear. I watched from the doorway as she guided the girls through an exercise on truth-telling. He was never one. "I used to believe power was about being unbreakable," she told them, "but I've learned it's about being honest, even when it's messy." Troy, for his part, was now spending 2 nights a week at the reentry center, helping with job prep and counseling sessions. One Saturday, he invited me to visit. We stood in a converted church basement where folding chairs formed a circle. There was coffee in a corner, and a stack of donated suits hung on a rolling rack by the door. Troy moved through the space with ease, greeting people by name, asking about interviews, checking on paperwork. A man in his 50s approached us, eyes kind. "You the one who raised him?" he asked, nodding at Troy. "I did," I said. He extended his hand. "You did good." It struck me then the man Troy was becoming wasn't just decent, he was trusted. And in this room, that meant everything. Back at Malcolm's, the house was alive with small routines. Malcolm had started teaching a weekend gardening class for local kids. Alana was now on the board of the community center. And me? I had become something I never imagined. A constant. Every morning, I brewed the coffee. I watered the herbs by the window. I helped Lila prep her portfolio for an upcoming student art exhibit. One evening, I was in the kitchen when Alana handed me a manila envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside were photos, dozens of them. Me with the kids at the center. Me laughing with Lila. Me planting carrots with Malcolm. Me sitting beside Vanessa and Troy at our new family dinners. "I've been collecting them," she said. "I thought maybe you'd want to remember this season of your life." My eyes blurred. I reached for a napkin and dabbed them gently. "Thank you," I whispered. She wrapped her arms around me. "You gave us so much. It was time we gave you something back." End quote. Later that night, I sat alone in the living room, the photo album open in my lap. Each image was a small miracle, proof that love, when chosen deliberately, could be repaired, rebuilt, renewed. The next day, I visited Robert. He poured tea and slid a stack of documents across the desk. "Everything's finalized. The foundation has been transferred. Malcolm and Alana are now listed as co-directors. You'll remain honorary chair, but your name will mostly be symbolic. 90. That's how I want it," I said. He studied me for a long moment. "You look lighter." "I am," I said, for the first time in a long while. Before I left, he handed me one final envelope. "This came for you. No return address. Postmarked from Chicago." I opened it in the car. It was from my first mentor, Miriam, a woman I hadn't seen in nearly 30 years. She'd read about me in a national magazine profile. The piece focused not on the drama, but the transformation. "You're walking a new path now," she wrote, "and the footprints you leave behind will matter more than any empire you built. I'm proud of you, and I believe in this version of Clara more than I ever did in the CEO." I sat in the car with the letter pressed to my chest, the city moving around me like wind. That weekend, we held a small celebration at the community center, just staff, students, volunteers. Malcolm gave a short speech. Lila's artwork was featured in the main hallway, framed by her own hands. Vanessa helped serve food. Troy manned the photo booth. At one point, Lila pulled me aside. "You're not like other adults," she said. "You don't act like you have all the answers." I laughed. "That's because I don't." She smiled. "I think that's why people listen to you." That night, as we walked home from the center under the glow of streetlights, Malcolm wrapped his arm around my shoulder. "You ever think about writing this down?" he asked. "The story?" "Yeah. I think people need to hear it." "I don't know," I said. "Would they believe it?" He smiled. "It's not about belief, it's about truth. And I think you've finally found yours." And as we turned the corner toward home, I realized he was right. This wasn't the ending I had planned. It was better. Spring deepened, and with it came a quiet kind of fullness. The house, once temporary, now felt like home, not in the sense of ownership, but in the sense of belonging. The rhythm of daily life had become sacred. Morning coffee with Malcolm, afternoon laughter echoing from the garden where neighborhood kids joined his classes, and evenings where Alana and I sat shoulder to shoulder prepping vegetables, peeling back more than just carrot skins. I had lived in luxury before. I'd known the touch of silk sheets and the silence of 20-foot ceilings. But here, every corner held memory, warmth, and breath. The clatter of dishes after dinner, the squeak of Malcolm's sneakers when he entered the house, the rustle of Alana's pages flipping in her book. These sounds, I now realized, were the true currency of a life well lived. The community center announced a summer fundraiser, something small, local. Raina asked if I'd speak again. "I think people still need to hear you," she said. "You're proof that it's never too late." I agreed. But this time, I didn't write a speech. I told a story. I stood in a room with creaking floorboards, mismatched chairs, and a single microphone, and I spoke not as a CEO, not as a cautionary tale, but as a woman who had been blind to what mattered. "I once believed success meant being the most powerful person in the room," I said. "Now I believe it means being the most present." The applause was soft, not thunderous, not rehearsed. It was real. After the event, Vanessa stood beside me in the parking lot, her arms crossed against the cool evening breeze. "I never said it out loud," she began, "but I'm proud of you." I looked at her, startled. She shrugged. "It's easier to say now that I'm not trying to outshine you." "I'm proud of you too," I said. She smiled. "Troy's flying in next weekend. He wants us all to have dinner, just us." I nodded. "I'd like that." The weekend came. Troy arrived with a suitcase, a new pair of glasses, and a lightness I hadn't seen on his face in years. We gathered in Malcolm's backyard, string lights overhead, burgers sizzling on the grill, kids from the center running through sprinklers across the street. Lila dropped by with her mother to say hello, then stayed for dessert. At one point, Troy tapped his glass with a spoon and cleared his throat. "I don't want to make this weird," he said, "but I have something I need to say. It's classting. It's Stan-like for. We all quieted. I used to think our family was broken, he continued. But now I think we just forgot what being a family meant. We forgot how to be vulnerable, and we forgot that love isn't earned through accomplishments. It's given freely, or it's not love at all. Vanessa reached over and took his hand. Malcolm raised his glass. To remembering, we toasted in silence. Later that night, as I washed dishes with Alana, she asked, "Do you miss it, the old life?" I paused. I miss the idea of it. The structure, the certainty, but not the emptiness. She nodded. You built something new here. I didn't build it, I said. I was invited into it, and that made all the difference. The final puzzle we'd been working on, an intricate image of a countryside at sunset, sat finished on the coffee table. We all stood around it that evening, admiring the picture that had taken us months to complete. It's funny, Malcolm said. You think you're missing a piece, and then one day, it just shows up. I think we were all missing a piece, I said. Until now. We glued the puzzle together the next morning and framed it. It now hangs in the living room above the fireplace, a symbol not of perfection, but of persistence, of the beauty in broken things made whole again. Weeks passed. Then months. Vanessa continued her work with the foundation. Troy returned each quarter, each visit more grounded than the last. Malcolm and Alana remained the quiet center of it all. As for me, I still volunteer at the community center. I still wake early, walk the garden, and sometimes, when no one's watching, I dance barefoot on the back patio while the radio plays old Motown songs. Because joy, I've learned, doesn't ask for permission. It only asks that you show up for it, every day. In the end, my story wasn't about revenge, or punishment, or even justice. It was about remembrance, of who I was, of who I could be, and of the power of quiet, relentless kindness to rewrite everything, especially the ending. The story reminds us that true wealth lies not in possessions or prestige, but in character, compassion, and the relationships we nurture. It shows that redemption is always possible for those brave enough to face themselves honestly, and that love, when given freely and without condition, holds the power to heal even the deepest fractures. In the end, kindness isn't weakness, it's legacy.